is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Hello and welcome into another edition of Three Maw. I am John Kurtz, joined by Derek Young from K-State Online and Cole Manbeck, former beat writer for the Manhattan Mercury. Let's not make any bones about it here, people. This won't be the most fun episode we've ever done, and because of that, you should probably start pouring your 360 vodka or your Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon right now. It would have taken a lot to get through that game on Friday night. So that's why you got to go stock up. See our friends from Holiday Distillery. If you are a vodka person, 360 vodka, great choice. If you are of the bourbon persuasion, it is Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon. Make sure to go pick those up. Hopefully it'll be more celebratory the rest of the year instead of trying to forget everything that just happened. But unfortunately, that's what we ran into on Friday with K-State losing in Stillwater 29-21. God, I will just tell you that my experience with this game was perhaps mercifully a little bit different than most people. I had tickets to a concert on Friday night that I really wanted to go to, so I saw the first quarter, and then I saw the Will Howard 70-yard run, and then the pass to Sinnott, and then I was out. And from that point, it was box score checking every once in a while during little breaks in the concert, and it was I think the next time I looked, it was 26-7, and then I looked at the end of the game and started going through the box score, and I was just oh my God. Now, I have rewatched the game since then. I don't even know. Derek, you were there. Where do you want to start with this? I guess let's start with this. This, to me, is the jumping off point. I think that is the worst football game K-State has played since they lost 45-0 in Ames in 2020. It was pretty pitiful all the way around, particularly on offense. But even then, the defense going up against a pretty... that's the thing. Oklahoma State did not look like any sort of world beater in that game. That's the part. Oklahoma State still does not look like a very good team, and you just let them roll over you. So take it away, Derek.
Yeah, I think 21 Texas could be it, too, just because of how that is.
I don't know. I think this is a lot worse than 21 Texas.
21 Texas got people fired, so I don't know. 21 Texas, 20 Iowa State both come to mind, but it's one of the worst performances in the Chris Kleiman era, and maybe the worst when considering the opponent, because obviously this version of Oklahoma State is worse than that version of Iowa State, worse than that version of Texas, but both of those certainly come to mind. It felt like a little bit, I'll just kind of, encapsulate the game. It felt like they came out flat, uninspired. Comments afterwards would suggest maybe that was the case, that they took Oklahoma State too lightly because of what they saw them show them. And then Oklahoma State obviously comes out a little bit more prepared, shows them a lot more looks because there is 2 weeks in between games. And obviously they played more inspired football because their backs are against the wall, and their season, can go one of 2 ways if they don't get that win. And obviously they're a proud program with a head coach with an excellent pedigree that knows ball. So that was probably inexcusable to have that kind of approach on the game. But Oklahoma State's not the type of team, program, or coached football team that's just going to lay down and let you take it. And obviously, some in the locker room, I guess, went into that game feeling that way. And that's pretty disappointing considering what we've heard about that locker room for some time. So I think that's a locker room loss there, at least to begin the game. You finally settle in and you make some adjustments and you're able to mount somewhat of a comeback bid, but obviously it's too little too late. The offense played better in the second half, still wasn't good enough, but they did play better. What I would say is there's been some criticisms about the defense, and I get it. They gave up a lot of yards, but still barely give up over 5 yards per play. So raw numbers at the end doesn't necessarily look problematic, especially since Oklahoma State's offensive numbers look pretty similar to Kansas State's, and we're pretty upset about the Kansas State offense. And defensively, everyone was really upset about the cushions and playing back and all that. And I get it. It's not a sexy way to win, but that obviously was a plan going into the game, and certainly was probably one that worked and one that makes sense when you think about it, that the only way that Oklahoma State was going to win that game going away was with explosive plays. Kansas State's had a problem with explosive plays all year, still gave up a few in this game even, probably way too many, especially on the ground. And Alabama had a couple good dimes early. But that was probably a way to win, because playing back and just being tight in the red zone ultimately is what kept Kansas State enough in the game to perhaps tie it. at the end. You only give up one offensive touchdown. If you play a little bit more aggressively, you're probably giving up more touchdowns, given what this defense has done throughout the season so far and what they're susceptible to, and plus being without both of its starting cornerbacks.
That's what I was just going to say. Like, once Will Lee went out of the game, too, and you already didn't have Jacob Parrish, like, kind of like, what are you going to do? What do you want him to do?
Getting beat over, leaving yourself susceptible to getting beat over the top probably makes you lose this game by 3 touchdowns, to be honest.
I guess I'm of the belief that you dare Alan Bowman to try and make tougher, more difficult throws and press up a little bit, because he's a veteran guy that's going to easily convert little slant routes like that. So I don't know. I mean, the problem is also you play off like that and then you don't tackle. So you give up the pass, but there were multiple times where they just missed the tackle. I don't have a ton of bones to pick with the defense. Like you said, DY, I mean, at the end of the day, they essentially allow what really is 19 points on 11 drives. I don't give them an issue on that other field goal, because K-State turned it over inside their own 25-yard line on downs. So
I get daring Al Bowman to do it, but like, that's the only way he was going to, that their offense could win the game. So they eliminated the only way that Oklahoma State's offense could win the game.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, though, if you told me that the defense would essentially give up 19 or 22 points, however you want to frame it, I would have said that K-State would win the game. Like, I probably would have taken that. I mean, heck, I think I predicted them to give up 17 in the pregame show, so that would have been right around that mark. I wouldn't have faulted them too much, especially when you factor in that they played without their best corner in Jacob Parrish for the entirety of the game, and then lost Will Lee relatively early in that game. So I don't have a ton of bones to pick with the defense, other than you got to get more pressure. I mean, it's frustrating that he drops back 35 plus times and you don't get a single sack. And I think they had 1 QB pressure in the game. So that was the biggest disappointment for me on the defensive line. Otherwise, it's all about the offense for me. And we can get into that more, John, but I think it's just, I do think it's probably the worst loss since the Iowa State game. And a couple of the other worst losses are actually at Oklahoma State in the Chris Kleiman era, where it just felt like another typical game in Stillwater in the Kleiman era, where they have just struggled massively offensively for whatever reason.
It did, except this time you weren't. The last 2 times you've been playing like pretty good Oklahoma State teams, where you were like, okay, well, this isn't going to go well. This time it was like, well, you're playing like total ass, but Oklahoma State is also not good enough to like completely run. I mean, if Oklahoma State, if they were put that effort out there against Oklahoma State in 2021, Oklahoma State would have won this game by probably 28. I mean, they would have ran and hid.
Yeah. The only thing I will say is like, but the way Mike Gundy coaches games when he gets a lead probably doesn't do that. And I think that probably had something to do with this game still being tight at the end. He is very much of the old school mindset. You get a lead and then you kind of sit on it and just suffocate a team until there's no time left. Like he's not like, get a 14-point lead, I'm going to put my foot on the gas and win by 30. You just, at least not in the last 2 or 3 years.
Well, I would come back to, not with this team that he has. You can't trust them. I mean, when he has Justin Blackman or Des Bryant and I mean, that sort of outfit that they had going for a while is a lot different.
But not even in 19 and 21. And 21, he almost went to the playoffs. So.
Yeah. To get back to your point, DY, on the mindset, that bothers me. I mean, you could tell they came out flat in that game. The first series offensively, you already had a feel that this was not going to be very pretty. And then they let them go right down the field on 15 plays defensively and get down 7-0. And they just looked flat. And for as many veteran guys as there are in that locker room, and the leadership and talking about wanting to be the first school to win back-to-back, or the first program in K-State history to win back-to-back league championships, to go into a game against a Big 12 opponent on the road with that type of mindset, potentially, that is a problem, and that cannot happen. And Chris Kleiman said on the post-game show on radio with Wyatt and Stan that, we knew we were going to get Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State's best shot. Like, we tried to tell the guys that, and sure didn't look ready to play still coming off a bye. And that's bothersome.
It's, to me, it's the shoe being on the other foot, and this team not having the experience or wherewithal to completely understand it. And the example that I will use is obviously, Kansas State doesn't play Oklahoma this year, but in the 4 prior meetings, Kansas State has won 3 times under Chris Kleiman in 4. I think I have that right.
Yeah.
And it's not because Kansas State was a better team than Oklahoma in those 4 years. It was because Oklahoma doesn't take Kansas State as seriously as they should, and Kansas State is the one that completely gets up for that game because Oklahoma has a target on their back every year, and that's a game that Kansas State would just love to have because of what it means to their program. Kansas State, the players don't understand, especially when you go on the road, after just winning a Big 12 championship, and also because you beat Oklahoma State last year 48-0, and they'll probably go through it again when they play Baylor this year because they smacked Baylor 31-3 last year, and even Missouri because you beat them 40-12 last year. You're the defending conference champions, and you just drummed all these teams last year. And you, especially when you go on the road, you're the team that everyone wants to beat. So you can't even just play C-level football and skate by like you could on some weeks. You're going to have to play a B game, and you probably could have got away with less because Oklahoma State did fall apart near the end. But like Oklahoma State, Missouri, all these teams, Baylor later, Texas Tech this week, these teams aren't playing the typical level of football against you that they would in the past. They're playing up here because you're the team that they want to beat.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually equate it to look at Notre Dame. So it felt like Notre Dame ran out of gas on Saturday from playing like a third straight game against somebody that's just getting up for them big time. I mean, Ohio State, Notre Dame was a huge game. Then they go to Duke. I mean, you're definitely getting Duke's best shot with game day there. And then you come to play Louisville where they're jacked up and ready, getting a shot at Notre Dame here is a huge deal for them. Now, that's a program that's used to it because it happens all the time. K-State is not as used to being in that position. But yeah, I mean, it's just horrendously disappointing. I mean, you'd like to think that you've got a coaching staff that knows how to deal with that. Chris Kleiman was at North Dakota State. How do you think it went every single week when they rolled into town somewhere? I mean, that's what they did. They had to deal with being the hunted all the time. We feel pretty good, I think, about the coaching staff that they have and everybody that's been around for a while and been around the block and knows how hard it took to get there. And even the player, let's talk about like the players making mistakes here. Like Hayden Gillum has been around for 100 years and he's snapping the ball 30 yards backwards when Will Howard's coming up to make a check on a 4th down play in the red zone. And Phillip Brooks is running terrible routes and not blocking somebody one-on-one for Will Howard on a play that's schemed up that should be a touchdown. You know what I mean? Phillip Brooks has been around for 100 years. I don't know. I mean, you got guys that have been around. That entire offensive line came back and we made a huge deal about it in the offseason. Like, do we have leadership from the offensive line? I mean, I don't, to me, there's not much excuse for it. There's not much excuse for it at all. I mean, you can say like it's a unique position and something that you have to get used to and whatever, but like there should be enough there to not have that happen because it was lethargic. It was flat. It was slow. I mean, just like everybody looked slow. I didn't see a shred of emotion from anybody not named Kobe Savage. I will shout him out. He always seems to bring some energy and I do appreciate that from him because I saw some of that from him during the game. But I mean, where the hell was it from like anybody else? I mean, they're paying this massive retainer for a motivational coach, for God's sakes, to basically be on the staff and travel with them. Like where is that getting them? Like what is happening with that? So I don't understand how it happens. I don't.
Yeah. And for the record, I wasn't using it as an excuse. And I know you probably didn't mean it that way, but it's the fact that that's not something that should happen. And that should be a point has the ability to get across. And I will say you were right. Like a lot of these guys were there in North Dakota State, or a chunk of these guys were there in North Dakota State where this was an every week thing. So I fail to get the impression that they didn't harp on this. It was something that was mentioned to us regularly in the off season, even at Big 12 Media Day by Chris Kleiman. I think it was a takeaway. It was a number one point that he made a lot and still has made a lot. But at the end of the day, like you can talk and tell these kids, and we're dealing with that till they're blue in the face. Like this is what it's like. And unless they fully understand it and embrace it, it doesn't mean a thing. So it's like the locker room has to take that.
Yeah, I will just to put a cap on that, I suppose, before we take a break here. Contrast that with Oklahoma State, absolutely coached and played that game like their season and perhaps jobs depended on it. That absolutely was evident too. You know, I mean, you can see it right away. Gundy was rolling with some trick plays. They have the fake punt, which, I mean, you guys know. Don't even get me started on special teams once again. It is a complete dumpster fire to where they're just waving the white flag and fair catching kicks at the end of the game, and you fall for a fake punt on like 4th and 1 from midfield. But the Gundy came out swinging like they were ready to go. They clearly had a sense of urgency that was just not there from K-State at all. Okay, well, I'm wearing my home field gear, so I've got my sweet K-State shirt on. We might be upset, but I am comfy in my my Copper Bowl K-State shirt. DY is repping Miami because the Canes had such a proud weekend as well, which you can also get at homefieldapparel.com. Get Mario Cristobal. He can use the code 3MA23 to get 15% off his first order. Cole's turning his camera down. Is that because you got home field too, Cole? Is that what's happening there?
It's a home field hoodie that actually just arrived last week, and it is super soft. Like it feels wonderful on these crisp fall mornings. So really comfortable fit. So yeah, rocking the home field.
Okay. Homefieldapparel.com, people. Get all your K-State gear. They've had a couple new drops here in the last 6 months. So tons of K-State gear, all great looking stuff. We love it. We wear it all the time. So be like us, and you can get 15% off with the code 3MA23 if it is your first order. We appreciate the support of Home Field Apparel. We'll continue to dissect this game coming up next.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
So I guess to me, the pivot from this opening conversation about the effort and attitude and all that was happening in the game is how much of it is a one-off? Like, this was a terrible effort by everybody involved. By the way, we haven't even brought up the fact that this was off a bye week. Okay. I realize Oklahoma State had a bye week as well, but doubly disappointing to have this sort of an effort when you had 2 weeks to gear up and think about it. And it seems like the only significant thing that happened during the bye week was getting a couple guys hurt. Is this indicative of like problems that are going to be there the rest of the year? Is this a one-off sort of thing? Like, how are we feeling about this? Because I'm not going to lie, like, my immediate thought after watching it and taking everything in was kind of like, this is a game that just sort of rocks you to the core and thinking about like, what is this season? Like, what are the expectations for the rest of the year? And like, what problems are there in the program? To me, it was that bad looking at it. Now, I don't want to be too overreactionary, and so that's why I raised the question here, and I've perhaps calmed down a little bit in a couple of days in thinking about it, but I don't know. That was a lot of concerns and questions that we've had seem to be really, really amplified in that game, and now I just wonder, like, where do you go from here? That's kind of the question.
For me, I would say that the lack, and I hope I'm right on this, I would say that this was probably the wake-up call for like the lack of passion, heart, necessary focus to zero in on an opponent, right? I wouldn't think that comes up again, because that's the easiest thing to erase, and you just got to lock in and take everyone seriously, because you can get beat on any Saturday in this league, and you can win on Saturday in this league.
Is it though, or is it this team read too much about how awesome they were during the offseason and didn't put in enough work then, and that's just going to be an issue here?
I think it was more of a week-to-week thing. I think someone hinted at it when we spoke afterwards, after the game, the post-game media session. I think it was like, we looked at the tape and thought, this will be okay. So I could be wrong. Well, that's what I said. I hope I am right on this, but I don't see that as being necessarily an issue that will repeat itself. I think this can be the wake-up front, the wake-up call on that front. However, I do think some of the issues with the offense are a little bit more things that aren't going to disappear. Like, do you got a guy that can just go make a play when you need it the most? Is your passing game have, long-term problems? Probably. I mean, you're sitting there playing Oklahoma State, who isn't the best defense in the world, especially against the pass, where they just gave up 350 yards to Rocco Beck, in the game before, and you have your receivers with 2 catches for 4 yards at the end of the third quarter, or near the end of the third quarter. So I think some of the football stuff is going to be a work in progress at best, but in terms of off the field lock in, see your opponent and take it seriously and have enough art, passion, and intensity throughout a game, I would hope and I think that is likely a one-off. What I will say is I do also think that this is not, I don't know how much better this gets overnight either, because I do look at the anatomy of a schedule a little bit. I always have, and that's why I said, look, Missouri, that's a problematic spot for Kansas State. I think we all agreed with that one, just because of how it's set up for Oklahoma State. I think we all said, they're not going to have their way with Oklahoma State because their backs are against the wall, and that's a proud program with a proud coach that knows ball and has a bye week to kind of get things right in a way. And now you're doing the same thing because Texas Tech finally is getting right and feeling good about themselves to where they can, squint and look at their schedule and how it has unfolded in the beginning of Big 12 play, where they just defeated Houston and Baylor. And now they say, the goals that we had before the season, despite our rocky start, are still there. I mean, they control their own destiny at this point. It's a night game blacking out. They sound out that game. So now you're getting you got the best version of Missouri possible. I mean, maybe not for the full 60 minutes, but you got a hot Oklahoma State at the beginning that was their best version possible, probably at least in the first half. And now you're probably getting the same thing with Texas Tech because of how things unfolded. So, and I'm not saying, Kansas State, woe is me, unlucky, but it's like, you better get your crap together because you're getting the same kind of situation on Saturday when you go to Lubbock.
Yeah, Tech has played 6 straight quarters of really dominant football. They farted around a little bit in the first half against Houston, but they crushed them in the second half, and they crushed Baylor from the word go on Saturday. So anyway, sorry, Cole.
Smallest average margin of defeat, according to Tom Fornelli, of teams with a minimum of 3 losses. Texas Tech's got the second smallest margin of defeat on the season at 5.6 points per game. I mean, they've been competitive in every game. Either the Wyoming loss that they had doesn't look bad now at all. I mean, what did Wyoming do
for 3 quarters and beat Fresno? So
yeah, they beat a ranked Fresno team in Laramie this last weekend, and then they should have had they could have easily had Oregon beat. I mean, they were up on Oregon with 6 minutes left in the game, and Oregon looks like one of the best teams in college football this year. It's going to be an incredibly difficult spot, tough place to play. No, they're down their starting quarterback, but Baron Morton is a top 150 national recruit. He has some pedigree and some talent to him as their backup quarterback. So it's going to be a major test. We're going to learn a lot about where this team and this season is headed based off what we see in Lubbock and the type of effort and inspired performance that I think we all hope that we'll see. Look, there's plenty of reasons to be negative about the Kansas State offense and what we saw against Oklahoma State. I guess I'll try to paint a glass half full picture here early on, and we can dive into maybe sort more of the offensive difficulties as we go here. But what I will say is Chris Kleiman and this coaching staff have had kind of these bizarre, unexpected losses multiple times, and they've bounced back from them over the last several years. I mean, you look at 2019, they lose that game to West Virginia. That's a West Virginia team in Manhattan that I don't believe they made a bowl. They weren't a good team. And Kansas State came back from that. They won at Texas Tech, and then they beat Iowa State when K-State was actually underdogs in Manhattan to win their last two regular season games. After that, obviously Oklahoma State's not as good as Tulane was last year, but it was kind of a flat, unexpected loss in your home stadium where we were saying a lot of the same issues about the offense. And again, you don't expect this to occur with as many guys that are back and your starting quarterback to have these offensive type issues. So I'm not necessarily excusing it, but I am saying that they have shown in the past that they can bounce back from performances like these. There's been a couple of these WTF type losses before, and they've figured out a way to navigate around it. Can this team do it? It's a different team. You can't just rely on the past to believe in the future that things are going to change necessarily. But I also think, and I said this on the pregame show, guys, and look, I'm not saying Oklahoma State is a good team, but I think that there was probably an overreaction to the South Alabama game a bit. I don't think they're as bad as they looked in that game. And we did talk about, I know you guys kind of mocked it when I said, well, they lost 34-27 in Ames against Iowa State the week prior before the bye week. And Look, Iowa State, it looks average. Like they look at least respectable. They killed TCU on Saturday. And I'm not saying we know TCU is not very good this year either, as it looks, but I think that maybe there's just been a little bit of an overreaction from the results we've seen from Oklahoma State. They might be a little bit better than we thought. I don't think they're a good football team, but they're probably better than what we expected.
I just think with all these Big 12 teams, because their floors are pretty low, and obviously that includes Kansas State at this point, it's like if they don't bring it, they're all vulnerable. They are just about every game. Like Iowa State, like they could, if they don't show up, they're going to get, if they went to Stillwater and didn't show up, they'd lose by 20, right? So it's just like none of these teams are good enough to not lock in and be ready and expect to win.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I mean, the league is just very much in a place where anybody on any given week could completely lay an egg or could rise up and totally surprise you. It's been a wild year so far this year.
I would say, and I'd have to probably dig into this, and maybe I'm being silly. Maybe it's kind of the prisoner of the moment the last 2 weeks, but like even more than past seasons, it seems like it's hard to go on the road right now because a lot of teams are having that problem. Now, the only one that I can really think of, like, obvious is when West Virginia went to TCU and won.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say, and I would make this statement, I would amend it to say outside of Oklahoma, Texas, and I think you can put Kansas in that category too. I think Kansas is above the fray as far as this group that we're talking about that is not good enough. And maybe it's just that Kansas is more well coached and not putting out those sorts of efforts yet. But I haven't really seen that from Kansas at all yet this year. I don't think it's them in there.
They had that effort against Nevada by far.
Okay, so fair enough. Okay, yeah, the Nevada game was bad.
We're just as susceptible as anyone else. I mean, I
think Kansas is well coached enough that they seem less susceptible to doing that. That would be my take.
I would disagree because if you're doing that against Nevada and where you almost lose to the worst team in the all FBS, then you're just as susceptible as everyone else. And look, I know Texas is really, really special, even though they just lost to Oklahoma, who I thought was solid and not special. Kansas lost that game by 26 and could have lost by 50. So, like, Kansas is not, I don't think, above the fray, I would say.
They weren't, I don't think any of that was an effort issue, though. I mean, they played a hell of a game for 3 quarters to stay in it. So, let they get a great effort to Texas. I don't know. I mean, that debate I don't mean to sidetrack it with that debate.
But it will be, I'm looking forward to watching Oklahoma State, KU, and Stillwater on Saturday because I want to see how, look, Oklahoma State, KU kind of gets a wake-up call at the hands of K-State and what they put on the field, and I think Lance Leipold would have had him ready to play anyways down in Stillwater. But the betting line for that game was KU by 3.5. So basically Vegas is saying on a neutral field, those two teams are pretty much even. And so actually, no, I'm wrong on that. They're saying KU would actually be close to 6-point favorites on a neutral field. I'm sorry. I think KU's better than Oklahoma State, clearly, but I am interested to watch that game and seeing if Oklahoma State plays inspired football again back-to-back weeks and how KU matches up in that because KU certainly dominated UCF, and UCF looks like a team that's just now going to kind of roll over and quit on the year.
Yeah. To defend UCF in that one, and I'm not trying to take anything, obviously, but they obviously played all week with a different quarterback too.
They kind of got hit with the KU at Texas situation there, where it's like 4 snaps into the game, John Rice Plumlee can't go, and their whole managing of that first couple drives of the quarterback, like they had dug themselves a multi-score hole by that point. So yeah, I mean, point taken, but I mean, KU kicked their ass. Don't mistake any of that. Don't mistake any of that.
KU is deservedly where they are, but yeah, I would just say that I don't think that they're completely above the fray. You can even say they fell asleep in the second half against Illinois. So Illinois is terrible.
Illinois. Woof, 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 woof. Yeah. Not good at all. Okay. Let's take a break, come back. We have not really dissected the offense, which I think a lot of people are going to want to hear us talk about that. They're going to want to hear us talk about the quarterback and not playing Avery Johnson on Saturday. So I promise, we will get into that coming up next.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
So, all right, let me ask you this, Derek. Power rank the problems within the offense, because it feels to me like the social media, like fan reaction right now has Will Howard like number one easy, and I would disagree with that. I'm not saying that he has played great football by any stretch of the imagination, but it feels like he's taken a lot of crap, which it's what happens when you're the quarterback, but a lot of crap for just systemic issues. And it's much different playing quarterback with what's going on everywhere else on offense right now than it was with Malik Knowles, Cade Warner, Deuce Vaughn, and a probably better functioning offensive line from last year.
Yeah, it's hard to power rank them because I think they all affect one another. And I really do think it's just like a bunch of things going wrong. And part of it is Will Howard, either if it's not making a quick enough decision, not a terribly accurate ball, especially vertically, a bad read, miscommunication, just not on the same page. Now, I'll say this, especially since 2 of the 3 interceptions were a culprit, had the same culprit, is that like this QB wide receiver stuff has got to get better but sooner rather than later. I think, I won't power rank necessarily people or position groups here. What I will say is like, I do think the top issue for me would be that these quarterbacks and Will Howard and his receivers do not seem to be cohesive at all right now. I mean, their lack of chemistry and making the same read on a look is very problematic and has been an issue going on for almost the entire season at this point. So I would say that probably needs cleaned up more than anything. And what I mean by that is you got the receiver seeing the coverage and running a certain route in response to that, and Will Howard throwing a different route in response to that. Now, without us being football savants and seeing the all-22 film or being in a meeting, we don't know who made the correct read and who did not, technically. So that's why it's hard to place fault, because we're not in those coaches' meetings. We don't know the exact rules and principles of what to do versus certain coverage. Heck, we probably don't even know what the coverage was, right? So I can't get into a deep understanding of that. What I do know is that they're not making the same read. And when you don't make the same read, you throw one ball, the receiver runs a different way, and you get picked off. I think that happened twice. Will Howard was running a back shoulder throw, and Phil Brooks went upfield. Now, wasn't a great route to begin with. So even if Phil Brooks runs the route the way that Will Howard expected him to, it's probably still not going to have a great result because he wasn't going to get open. And it's probably not a ball that Will Howard should even throw, because I don't think the back shoulder throw was going to be there regardless. And then on the first interception, receiver running down the field, and Will Howard expecting to come back. And so he throws the ball expecting to come back. He doesn't. The safety's there. Now, again, they're not on the same page, but even if they were, I don't know if that's a ball Will Howard should be throwing anyways, because the safety was sitting there pretty comfortably knowing the ball was going to be thrown right to him.
Yeah, I mean,
those are I think the most glaring issues. And now you can pick apart the offensive line, not the best protection throughout the night. And I think they lost the line of scrimmage, but and DJ Giddens had a slow start on the ground. At the end of the day, I mean, DJ Giddens did start to get going, so maybe you should have ran through to set up the pass and maybe playing that out a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, Will Howard is not playing good football, but he's not getting any help from his receivers, and that lack of chemistry, that the offense is going to continue to be problematic until that lack of chemistry is shored up.
So you got receivers and the quarterback not aligned on making the right read. You also have receivers running the wrong routes, which we know. I mean, they're actually running the wrong routes at times, and so. Look, Will tell you, like, he can't make that throw. Like the interception downfield with the safety over the top, the triple coverage throw in the season opening game where he's hit, but he's trying to throw it into triple coverage. Like he's made reads that we didn't see from him last year. I mean, Will had 15 touchdowns to 2 interceptions in 6 Big 12 games last year. And since the Alabama game, he's thrown 9 interceptions in 6 games. So he'll tell you he's making far too many mistakes. Somebody as cerebral and smart and intelligent as he is and experienced as he is, he's not going to excuse it. He's going to take the blame as well. And you would like to see a significant amount of that cleaned up. Look, I take issue with the way these receivers are running routes. I think they're not crisp. I think they're not sharp with the way they run routes. I think they're lazy at times. That bothers me. There's some guys that need to be playing a little bit more consistently and giving a little bit more effort at that position. They got to be a little tougher at the wide receiver position as well. And then they need to be more explosive, obviously. I went back, guys, and checked on all of the 30, 40, 50-yard plays last year that Kansas State had. They had 25 plays of 30 or more yards. So far this year, they have 9 plays of 30 or more. So they're not that far off the pace. But where the problem is last year's team had 18 plays over 40 yards. This year's team has 2 plays over 40 yards. They're just not generating that explosiveness. And a lot of it is really at the wide receiver position, guys. So over the last 3 games, Missouri, UCF, and Oklahoma State, wide receiver position, not counting Ben Sennett or the running backs, the longest pass completed to a wide receiver against Missouri, Jaden Jackson for 21 yards. Oklahoma State, Phillip Brooks for 25 yards. UCF, Seth Porter for 16 yards. Like they're not getting any verticality from the wide receivers. Like it's been basically Ben Sennett or Jaden Jackson one time. I mean, it's been Ben Sennett and Trayshawn Ward in the passing game that have 3 of your 5 passes for over 30 yards. It's like, where's the explosiveness for this Kansas State offense? They just have not been able to keep defenses honest with the threat of any verticality. And that was such a big part last year. I mean, they had 8 plays of 60 or more yards last year. They don't have a single play of 60 or more yards this year.
And like we continue to say this, but it's like more than just one issue too, because you have probably one that's 40 yards or more if Will Howard connects with Jaden Jackson for the touchdown when he had 2 steps on a corner against UCF too. And I believe that was the south end zone on the southwest corner. So it's a multitude of, the problem is it's not like one issue, like one culprit every time. There seems to be a different culprit, which probably is more conducive to what we're saying here. It's, a lack of cohesion, a lack of chemistry. And I get, people are going to say, Malik Knowles, you're missing that verticality at the wide receiver position. And that might be the case, especially with his big play ability. But let's not sleep on, because the more we're talking through this just came into my mind when listening to Cole. Like, especially with maybe sometimes what appears to be a lack of toughness, whether that be the physicality at the line of scrimmage or just, willing to go out there and just grind. And
Cade Warner, baby.
And then the effort thing. As Cade Warner, they talked all last year about how he was probably the best leader that anyone came around. And I think if he saw some of this on his watch, if he's in that locker room, he's probably ripping someone's ass in that wide receiver room, I imagine. And I don't think you could get away with it. Now, yeah. I'm not saying that they can get away with it. And it's easy for a coach to rip someone's ass and, whatever and what have you. But it means more when it comes from one of your players. Now, I think Seth Porter probably has that gene too, but it's harder to do that when you're doing it from the bench. When you have a starter and a really big-time top contributor that's willing to rip someone's ass and get all over him, whether it be Cade Warner or be Deuce Vaughn, I think that means something. I think they're lacking that. I mean, you have that maybe at Will Howard. Maybe you have that in the offensive linemen that aren't performing well. Someone's got to be up there leading from a front, ripping. There's things that you can't let go if you're a player, like behaviorally or performance related on the field, that isn't, should never happen. That starts I don't know. I think they're missing that Cade Warner thing.
I got an idea, DY. Let's bring Cade Warner back as a GA, like now, immediately. Bring him in because they need a guy like, hey, he's not on an NFL roster now, I don't believe. So let's get Cade Warner. I mean, he's a smart, intelligent guy, and he's a heck of a leader. And I think they're lacking leadership in the wide receiver room because your most experienced wide receiver in the program is running probably the laziest routes.
Yeah, I could not agree. I don't think I've come around more from like what my expectation level was for a player coming into the program to like now how much I appreciate him than Cade Warner in a long time. Like he's, at Nebraska, it just seemed like, okay, here's a typical K-State receiver is not going to be athletic enough to, he was athletic enough to make some huge plays. He was incredibly reliable. He's a guy that was going to be on the same page with Will Howard. And yes, all of the leadership capabilities, which is probably the best attribute that he had. So yeah, I think you're 1,000% missing a lot of that. And you guys have helped really underscore my point here. Like, I do not, again, Will Howard is not playing good football. And yes, when you have all these problems with the offense, particularly explosiveness being a huge issue, and you've got just a freaking bundle of explosiveness sitting on the bench in Avery Johnson, a quarterback. Like, I understand some of the frustration people had about not at least giving him a shot. Like, not, the weird thing to me about the Avery piece of it is that he got snaps against Missouri. Like, they worked it into the offense against Missouri, and that was a huge road spot, really tough environment. And now we're here at Oklahoma State. You didn't use him against UCF, which I understand because the game went well and the offense was just rolling. But now we're here 2 games later, and there's just no piece of him in the offense, and you're not going to try that to get some kind of a spark, something. I mean, the offense just, especially in the first half, just desperately needed a spark, like something to get something going. And that to me is a waste when you have him on the bench and you're not even going to try that. I'm not sitting here calling for Avery Johnson as the starting quarterback, even like the full, like give him multiple series in that game. But you can't roll him out there with a package. You can't try something with him on Saturday. That was very curious to me.
Yeah, I think I have 3 thoughts there, and we'll see if I can remember them all. One being that the explosiveness idea. I think if you're feeling like you need to be more explosive, then you should probably play the guy that can provide more explosives. Not now. I'm not saying like time to start Avery Johnson. Not doing that, because I do think you have to earn it with your performance. So, but you can't earn it with your performance until you get some tastes, and that he probably should have, I thought. So that goes to my second point being, like, I understand like having some reservations about playing a true freshman in that moment. I do. I get it. But your reservations would have to do with him turning the ball over because of his inexperience and going through growing pains and kind of experiencing those lumps. And you can't protect him from that forever, because going through those things is how someone grows, right? So, and if your offense is going to turn the ball over 3 times anyway, I don't know what you're protecting, I guess.
Like they're doing a great job of turning the ball over anyway, so you might as well do it with some more explosiveness.
Yeah, when my third and final thought, and I waited to do this one because I kind of thought about this and spoke about this, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, and it's not necessarily me being critical of the coaches, more than me being kind of confused of the logic, because I'm sure it's fine in the grand scheme of things. But something that perplexes me a little bit is how game dependent their plans and approaches are sometimes holistically. And that's for offense and defense. And I get that there might be things that we do not know, whether it be injury related or not, that never sees the light of day. And I get that. So I guess I'm just searching for explanations, but sometimes like their personnel choices from week to week are just like lack so much continuity that I wonder if it plays a little bit with players. And that's not me being critical of the situation, me just wondering aloud what that impact is, because as you said, like there's a plan for Avery Johnson against Missouri. So he's played 2 of the first 3 games, but then 0 after that, when there seems to be an opportunity to incorporate that once again. And then even defensively and offensively, like, other things that come to mind that I'm struggling to come up with the words for right now, like Garrett Oakley, like him being such an integral part against UCF and then barely seeing the field. I think he had like 2 snaps in the first half against Oklahoma State. Now maybe an injury popped up again that we don't know about.
He hit a drop. He hit a drop too. I don't know if they just benched him because
but that was later in the second quarter, and I think that was one of his first snaps. So it was surprising in general. He didn't play the first quarter. He never got on the field. And then another thing, like defensively, Like Daniel Cobbs hasn't played a snap all year, I don't believe. He didn't even make the trip against Missouri. And maybe he was injured and now he's healthy and they're playing him. But then he's out there in man coverage, in the second half. I just wonder if their plans sometimes are just so radical that it alters their personnel so much that it lacks enough continuity for someone to get comfortable and in a rhythm.
Well, yeah. So what you guys just talked about, they're willing to put Avery Johnson on the field in Columbia and the team's first road game against the best defense that they faced this year. Like they're comfortable enough to do that, but then they're not comfortable enough to do it against weaker opponents like a UCF, which you didn't necessarily need to do it against UCF. The offense was fine. But against Oklahoma State, we're talking about a team with the worst pass efficiency defense in the league, not a great defense by any means, and you're not playing well and you need some explosive plays. And look, they couldn't stop Will Howard in the QB run game. I mean, he ran for over 100 yards on 10 carries. Think what Avery Johnson might have been able to do against the way that they were defending the QB run. I also think Trayshawn Ward only getting 16 snaps when he looked more explosive than DJ in this game. I mean, I don't know if you guys thought the same, but I'm watching Trayshawn Ward. He's got a little pop to him. He looked fresher than he had in a while, and DJ just made me look a half step slower. I don't know. Maybe it was just the way, the scheme and the holes were when he was in the game, but I thought Ward looked more explosive. Well, he has 9 touches for 59 yards. He's averaging, a significant yards per touch, and he's only on the field for 16 snaps. DJ's on the field for 58, according to Pro Football Focus. So I don't know. Yeah, there's some questionable things. Daniel Cobbs, you mentioned it, DY, like 3rd and 8 in the fourth quarter of a big play, and he's in single man coverage on Brennan Presley. And it's the first time I've seen Cobbs play this year, and he's on their best receiver in their program. So I don't know. Some kind of bizarre things that unfolded. The coaching staff had a very poor game as well. John, you talked about the fake punt earlier. Like, I think every K-State fan in America was thinking, okay, watch for the fake here. Leave your defense on the field. They're near midfield. They'd already ran 3 trick plays in the first quarter of that game. Leave your defense on the field and be ready for that. And you're not ready for it. So that things like that were frustrating. And then I felt like Chris Kleiman I'll be curious for your thoughts on this, DY. I felt like Chris Kleiman panicked, kind of like the Alabama game, Sugar Bowl, where he just started chasing things and doesn't kick the field goal on a 4th and 8. When it felt like 4th and 8, the way they were playing was going to be so difficult to get. Goes for the 4th and 3 on his own 25. I mean, the play was there, just threw it too hard. But it's just like it felt like they were kind of chasing and panicking at different points of the flow of the game.
4th and 3, I think at that point of the game, I can get behind that. That's a gettable one. And you're you're looking to see how many drives are left. I get that one. 4th and 8. That's a field goal.
Yeah. And also, I hate to keep harping on it. How in that moment is the ball getting snapped 30 yards backwards when Will Howard's coming up to make a check? When you've got the whole point of the advantage of this offensive line thing was this experience, and you've got a guy that's been in the program forever. I struggle with that. That of all the plays from that game that make me very upset, that is high on the list.
Yeah, it was very frustrating. DY, you had a better view than we did. This was a big play in the game. They called Cooper Beebe ineligible downfield. Or maybe you thought I was going somewhere else with it, but they called the offsetting foul. It was 2nd and 4 at the 10. And they committed PI near the end zone in case they would have 1st and goal at the 1 on that drive. They called Cooper ineligible downfield. ESPN never showed us a replay, and it would surprise me. The play happened pretty quick. It would also surprise me with a guy like Cooper that he was downfield. Did you see that? Because that ended up being offsetting in case they ended up in a 4th and 8 instead of 1st and goal at the 1, and they get no points out of the drive.
I didn't see it. I don't know if you guys remember this. Oklahoma State, when you're in the press box, you're basically right at that one end zone by the locker room. Yeah. Huge big screen. So I'm literally 100 yards away from that.
Yeah. No, you're right though. That was a big play. That was a big play. I'm sure a lot of people will want us to talk about going for 2.
I like it.
I'm honestly fine with it. I understand the logic behind it. I'll probably leave Derek to fully flesh that one out. But even then, I mean, this is back to our conversation about the receivers. I mean, I like the play that they dialed up there, and it worked. But you got to catch the ball.
The play worked. You got to catch the ball. RJ Garcia dropped the ball. Keegan Johnson threw it where it needed to be. I didn't love the play. I think it's a very congested area to run a trick play of that has a lot of those moving parts. It's not as simple as a halfback option pass. Not that I'm suggesting they run that. I didn't love the call. It certainly worked. It should have been it. They should have got it. And I know there's a lot of fans, and I get that because they've just been accustomed to a certain way of football, but that's the right call to make in that situation, in my opinion, because even with Kansas State struggling as much as they are from an offensive standpoint, and I get that. Like, you can expect your team, and the statistics bear this out, to get those 2 yards at least 1 of 2 times. So if you get it the first time, you can kick an extra point to win. And like Chris Kleiman said, they almost lost that way against Texas Tech because Texas Tech almost did it to them. So I didn't hate the decision. I didn't love the play call.
I'm split on it. There's a part of me that's like, all right, kind of read the room, the way your offense is playing, game flow, like probably just kick the extra point and keep the momentum going, because Oklahoma State had just relinquished a 26-7 lead that would have been 29-22, and there would have been some game pressure on. There still was. I mean, an 8-point game, there's game pressure. But what I will also say is I didn't hear fans complaining when they went for 2 on the previous drive to cut it to 26-15 because it worked. So they were in that position to go for 2 on that second time or kick the extra point to make it a 7-point game because they went for 2 earlier, and Will Howard got in the end zone for the 2-point conversion, and it was successful. So if it would have worked, everyone would be like, well, you cut 2 more points into the lead between the 2-point conversions that they converted, and talking about 29-23 game, and you had 2 opportunities then as it unfolded to win the game if you would have converted that 2-point conversion. RJ Garcia's got to catch the ball. I would also say, DY, you run a double reverse pass like that, I would hope there would be a guy more open when we're running a trick play like that. But to your point, that's a tight space to run something.
Yeah, because even if you get fooled there, it's not like you're using one half of the field too.
Yeah, like I would like to see us run a trick play like that could go for like 60 yards, pop a big play, not necessarily to get 2 yards. The way that Will Howard was running the football in that game, like maybe you just run a QB run read type play, because that's what they did earlier and it worked.
But and I agree, but then that's a thing too there, that if it doesn't work, then you're pissed that they didn't throw it, I think. So I mean I would be, I think, in that scenario.
Yeah. Either way, I get to reemphasize the point, Derek, because I think people don't fully get the analytics piece of that. It's playing the odds that if you're going to go for 2 twice, there's a statistically very good chance that you're going to get one of them.
And if you get the first one.
So if you get the first one, then all you have to do is line up and kick an extra point to win the game for the second one. That is the idea behind it.
And I know it's kind of like when people started going for 4th down all the time, that it's hard for people to wrap their mind around completely. But it's done that way by just about every NFL coach at this point too.
And you do it that way. So if you get to the end of the game and it's 29-28, right? There's 30 seconds left in the game, and you're like, hey, I want to go for 2 and just try to win this thing right here. Well, you do it earlier in the game, so you know what you need to get down the road, right? You don't wait. If you're going to do it at the end of the game, you should actually do it earlier, because then you know that you're, okay, we're down 8. We're going to need to move quicker here. So I don't know. It's also the argument, when you're down 9 or 10, you go for 2 earlier in the game, so you know what points output you need. So I'm not going to get all that upset. There were much bigger issues at play. Plus, it should have worked.
Yeah. I just, if people want Chris Kleiman to be aggressive on 4th down and use the analytics there, then they can't criticize him for using the analytics on the 2-point conversion stuff.
Yeah, no,
that's really where I'm at. I've always been, I think, especially early on, Chris Kleiman, 2019, 2020, Chris Kleiman was not very aggressive or on the cutting edge of any of these things at all. I'm with you, Cole. I think there were some things like game flow wise that he still doesn't have a great feel for. It's not his strength as a coach, but I appreciate that he's at least trying. And I appreciate that he was willing to do that in that spot, because that is the way that the game is going. Like, if you're on the cutting edge of analytics, like, that is what it would say to do. So I appreciate that he is willing to do that, at least.
And it might be a thing too, like, and this might support what he did more, where you probably do that. You're more likely, or should more likely do that on the road, I think.
Yeah.
Go for the win. Right? They always say go for the win on the road when you can, right?
Yeah.
So what do you guys do at the quarterback position moving forward if Will struggles early at Texas Tech?
I see there's so many things that go into that where it becomes difficult to manage, and it's like, I don't envy them if that is the case, but you have to have. This is one of those fork in the road games now that we stand. It's what Texas Tech had when they played Houston. It's what UCF just had when they played Kansas. Like, some of these Big 12 teams, it's what Oklahoma State just had against Kansas State. Like, a lot of these teams are already having those fork in the road games. Oklahoma State sold out, won the game. Texas Tech blast Houston, and then, the following week beats Baylor. Like, these fork in the road games are coming up a lot earlier. Kansas State is in that same situation. And because the Big 12 championship is the goal, like, you can't allow yourself, if this game starts to unfold like it did against Oklahoma State, not to try something different.
I agree. I was just about to say, I would hope it's relatively short, because, like, the season's on the line. I mean, yeah, like, make no mistake about it. The season's on the line. Now, a part of the reason why the Oklahoma State game is just so vomit-inducing is because, to me, it's like a lot of the steam has already been taken out of the season anyway. I mean, it's going to be you've got Texas still on the schedule in Austin, so I mean, the odds of getting to the Big 12 championship game significantly decreased. You also just laid a complete egg on national TV. Like, it kills me that the last two times people have legitimately been watching this team were Alabama and where they have not been great performances, and I think, like, that brings up bigger picture issues. It's not really fair that it's that way for schools like K-State in the Big 12. I mean, generally, I would say, like, anybody in the new Big 12 is going to get this kind of treatment, where if you don't perform well when people are actually watching, when the spotlight's on, like, it is just so much easier for anybody to write you off, even when you are playing good football and putting something nice together. K-State has not taken advantage of that at all. Big 12 championship game was great, so I'm not going to just totally, but so far in this spot this year and then in the bowl game, I think it's done a lot of damage. So I hate that element of it, and that's what, to me, just took a lot of steam out of the season for me, where it's like, you're going to be there. I don't know. It's outside of beating Texas, I don't know what K-State can do the rest of the year on this schedule to earn any level of, like, semi-national respect, because people just watched that on a Friday and it looked bad. It looked really bad.
This is the hope eliminator game. If Texas Tech loses, it's their fourth loss of the season already. If Kansas State loses, they're 1-2 in a Big 12, and that's coming from a place where they thought they were at worst the third best team in the Big 12 with a chance to make a return trip to Arlington and compete for a Big 12 championship game. So this is the hope eliminated game in my mind for both teams. And Texas Tech has the benefit of probably going into it feeling much better about themselves for the way they smacked Houston, smacked Baylor. You get it at home, you're playing in front of a sellout crowd, and you feel like you're starting to probably play to the level that where you expected going into the season, even though, those losses to Wyoming and Oregon don't necessarily feel that bad, and West Virginia is respectable enough. So that's where I'm at. And of course, Texas Tech is just as hungry because they know Kansas State was the Big 12 champions last year. They haven't beaten Kansas State freaking forever either. So everybody in that locker room wants to finally beat Kansas State as well. So that's going to permeate there throughout just as much as anything. And so, yeah, this is a fork in the road game for Kansas State. You could still say at this point, because of how their season has unfolded, Texas Tech's probably every game's a fork in the road game for them.
Yeah, what I will say is, so circling back to my question on Will, I just want to say that, I think we all hope that Will find success in this game, because I hate that Will's going through this right now and struggling, and the criticism, because we all love Will and he's a great dude, and just hope that he can get it on track. What I will say about this game is, I think, John, it might have been you and me. I know I had K-State losing to Tech in the preseason. We had him beating Oklahoma State. And DY, I think you had him winning, right?
No, I had him losing to Tech.
Oh, you had him losing. Okay. All right. So think of it this way. You beat Tech, like you're kind of where you thought you'd be at this point in the season, right? 2-1 in the league, because you thought the loss would have occurred in Lubbock, but then you get the win in Lubbock. That kind of wipes out the Oklahoma State loss in a way, at least the way I was looking ahead to the season. I thought they'd be 2-1 through three Big 12 games. So I don't know. Like, I think you can feel a lot better about the season if you beat Texas Tech, because then you come home and you got TCU and Houston, and then you're talking about a 4-1 start in league play. I think that can this game is huge for both teams, and I just hope we see a really, really inspired effort from K-State, an angry, inspired effort where they execute well and come out with a win in Lubbock. It'd be huge, and I think K-State opened as like 1.5 point underdog, so it's basically a pick-'em type game. I don't know. We'll see.
This is a spot where I think both teams are going to play well. So because they put themselves in this position, and Texas Tech is where they are, like Kansas State is capable of playing a good game and losing this Saturday.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I would amend, Cole, just a little bit to what you said. I mean, I agree. I think that's some pretty good perspective on it. Again, the pouty me is like, well, I hate doing that on national TV and what happened and losing that game that way. But I think you're right in terms of like general perspective on the season. I also would just be careful about saying, then you get to come home for TCU and Houston, and that'll be 2 wins, bang, bang, because I mean, we've seen this team roll out pretty poor effort against Oklahoma State. I still think they would be capable of losing one of those 2 games, despite how bad Houston and TCU look. But you are correct.
Capable of losing them, but less likely just for it being at home, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've set the table pretty well. It's going to be a huge game on Saturday. We'll be back to talk more about it later on this week, so make sure you tune in for that. Make sure you get your Bent Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon or your 360 Vodka from our friends at Holiday Distillery. Make sure you get stocked up on your home field apparel gear, homefieldapparel.com, 3MAW23, that promo code for 15% off your first order. We appreciate the work of Nick Springer behind the scenes. For Derek Young and Cole Manbeck, I am John Kurtz. Thanks for listening to 3MAW. Take care, and we will talk to you soon.